Today on the podcast, we have Stephen Speer. Stephen is the founder and CEO of ecommerce lending, an advisory firm specialized in SBA loans for online business acquisitions. And prior to that, Stephen was an SBA BDO for a few years, and he was a top performer. But despite his success, it wasn't the right fit for Stephen. And in this episode, we unpack why that was, as well as discuss some of the sales and marketing philosophies that Stephen has used to make himself successful. So stick around. So Stephen,
Okay.
I'm just jumping right into it. We were kind of set here to talk about sales, salesmanship, also kind of some time management stuff. And I still want to get into some of that with you. But before I do that, I just wanted to kind of learn a little bit about your backstory, because I know you were an SBA BDO for many years and then actually moved over to becoming a broker, starting your own company. And I'm just curious, how did you get into SBA lending in the first place?
So actually, relatively, I don't have that many years in SBA lending. I first started out in residential lending up in my adopted city of Chicago. I'm originally from Southern California, went to business school at University of San Diego, and then moved to Chicago in my early or mid 20s, I guess. Um, and I started in finance there, and I worked for Wells Fargo, I worked for Chase, among others. And I really, so I spent 22 or about 20 years on the residential side. I ran offices. At one point, I had an office of 56 employees.
Oh, wow.
I got burned out on a residential side, but also on the residential side, I was focused in providing financing for entrepreneurs, for business owners. And oftentimes it'd say, hey, I'm looking to, thanks for helping me out on my home loan. But I'm looking to buy a building. I'm looking to buy a dental practice. I'm looking to buy, all these small businesses. And so I started gravitating towards providing financing for them on the commercial side. And then I started doing both. And then I really liked the commercial side of things. I really started liking less the residential side. On the residential side, it's really high burnout. You're interrupted constantly during dinner and on weekends and all this. So as I got older, I really gravitated towards the commercial side of things, and then primarily SBA. Not always SBA, but primarily SBA.
Yeah, at one point
Yeah.
you went into just being an SBA BDO, right?
Yes, and that's what I did. I primarily focused on acquisitions because that's what I like to do. And I really feel and felt at the time that you got to be a specialist. You can't just like be all to everybody. And I really liked acquisition. That's kind of where I kind of honed in on, at the time, shoring up financing for doctors as they expanded their practice, which was at the time pretty prevalent, as the dental industry changed quite a bit. It used to be like a dentist would have his or her practice, and that was pretty much it. And what was evolving to a dentist having one practice, buying another, buying another, buying another. So I got involved with that business acquisition side of things. And then about 9 years ago, I had a client looking to buy a business, but it was an online business. Like, can you, Stephen, finance a business that sells its wares on Amazon? And I said, well, I guess I assume so, but let me find out. And obviously I went back to him and said, yes, I can. And that kind of started the whole, evolution of really not only being specialized in business acquisition, but being specialized in the online space. As you know, that's pretty much all we do here.
9 years ago is early. And for our industry, which is like 20 years behind everyone else, like that's amazing that you can even get an SBA lender where you were at to consider that type of loan request. Where were you at that point?
I was on my own, and then in 2015, no, 2016 actually, I was approached by a bank in your neck of the woods to join their SBA division. And at the time, it really made sense. I was a broker, and obviously we're much more than that here at e-commerce lending, but I liked their offer. I liked the people that I was working with at the time. And I joined their operation, and I was there about 2.5 years, and I went from there to another SBA division of another bank more local to the Tampa Bay area. And that certainly didn't work out. And that's when I said, okay. And during that time, I really wanted to go back to doing my own thing and building a brand, building a firm, not just a broker, but a firm. And that's when I jumped all in on e-commerce lending, and done quite well since then.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So that's different than when I see. I'm curious. I know you, but like, I guess I just didn't know your whole story, because it's very unique for an SBA BDO to go into being a broker. I know a lot of brokers that want to go into being a BDO, and maybe it's a grass is always greener type of thing, but you were on that side before, and then you came onto my side as, working as a lender. And did you not like it, or?
I did not like it. I feel that the business model is broken. It doesn't work. I mean, a BDO should be going out getting business, not packaging his or her own loans. So what we've done here at e-commerce lending is that we have one person that has a consultation calls with the borrower. Once the borrower is under LOI, then it goes to another person who gets the loan application out and facilitates that whole process. And then we have another person that facilitates the closing process. So we're very delineated. That model works. The whole like BDO, doing paperwork all day long. It's just, you're not going to be a big producer doing that. You're just not. And most shops, as you know, don't provide enough support for their BDOs at all. They're having to babysit their loans. They're having to do other people's job. They're having to do spreads and this and that, and just really be more involved in the paperwork side, instead of going out and doing high value things like, I don't know, going out and getting business. And that's all that I do. That's all that Rocky Claiborne, our national sales manager, does. Then we have other people in place more behind the scenes that facilitate the whole paperwork side of things, the whole loan operation side of things.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, it's just crazy. Why would you pay someone this money to then go do arbitrary kind of paperwork stuff, or, even I've heard even worse, liquidations or something crazy like that.
Or PPP. I had a friend in 2000 that works for a pretty prominent SBA lender who pulled him in on PPP loans, and he was about to shoot his head off. I mean, it was brutal.
Those were grim days. Yeah, we had to do it, right? But I did it for about 30 days, and then they got us back into regular 7A. But that's mind-numbing work, and I think the program is fine and it helped businesses, but like, I'm not that guy.
Well, also, I mean, you have quite an advantage there at Fundex, the fact that you do have support, and it's just amazing how many lending institutions, SBA shops, don't provide their BDO support. Yeah. I mean, they don't. They're like, get this, get that. And before you know it, you become your underwriter's assistant. I mean, do you not? Like, not you, but a BDO becomes their underwriter's assistant. And that's what drove me nuts at the various shops when I was an employee at a given shop. I felt like I was the underwriter's assistant, and that's just, or the closer's assistant. And it cannot be like that to be a high producing BDO. The systems that the typical shop use do not work.
I know BDOs. I had one guy I was going to bring on the podcast who's a big producer, and he basically no-showed, and now he's an enemy. But that's another story for another day. I'm just kidding. I don't want any beef with so, but he had closings. So I have 2 closings today. So do you. And I'm recording this podcast because we have support. Why I don't need to facilitate a closing as a BDO. That's just not my skill set. Now, if there's an issue, I step in, because I
Right.
feel like I'm a problem solver, and a BDO is paid to do that type of work. But I know a lot of BDOs that if they have a closing, they're just out for the day. Like, don't try to send them a deal. They're at the closing. And what are they actually doing at the closing? I don't know.
You know, I do have a different background. I wasn't, you know, uh, I didn't start off in SBA, but I'll tell you, mortgage banking, you learn that if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. Um, you know, the whole spray and pray. That's one thing that I certainly don't do. We don't certainly do here. But what's amazing is that you know, candidly, most SBA shops, they want the guy that does or the gal that does 8 to 10 million a year, who will show up at all the worthless pipeline meetings, that will toe the line. And that's one reason why it didn't work out when I did go work for a couple of SBA shops. I don't toe the line. I literally told one SBA shop that I worked for that I don't do meetings. They're a waste of time, but I will outproduce absolutely everybody combined. And that's exactly what I did. Um, you know, and Bill was on my team. Bill Van Devin,
Oh,
our
okay.
loan operations senior vice president here at ecommerce lending, was on my team. He and I did 20 million in the first quarter of 2019 together,
Wow.
and we outproduced absolutely everybody by a long shot. And yet they were trying to, you know, even though I told them before they hired me, I don't do meetings. I'm not showing up at meetings. And there was just, you know, so they didn't like the fact I wasn't a yes man. And I'm being really candid on this interview, by the way. You know, they didn't like the fact I wasn't a yes man. And that's what allowed me to gravitate to you know, not just becoming a broker again, but actually developing a brand. And I did that while I was working there. I never used their email. I always used Stephen at ecommercelending.com. I promoted the brand as such, and it just grew and grew and grew. And then
Mm,
I brought on
gotcha.
support, and then I eventually left, and I was ready to go. I was plug and play at that point.
How do you do 20 million in a quarter as a BDO? Because you're on track for a big year, bigger than 99.9% of BDOs. What were you doing to even produce those types of results?
It's actually what I was not doing. I was not packaging deals. I was not. I mean, obviously, we did a lot of front end, meaning we were making sure the businesses that we were that our buyers were attempting to acquire qualified for financing. We were pre-qualifying buyers, you know, so it really worked out well. And it's more of what I was not doing. I was staying away from the paperwork side of things, and strictly, you know, shaking hands, kissing babies. And I'm sure that if you interviewed or if you surveyed all the top producers you've had on their show, they're not doing all that. They can't. You can't do 50, 80, $100 million if you're stuck doing paperwork all day long. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, our biggest producer we had, shout out Daniel Park. He has three loan officers essentially working kind of under him. I don't want to offend anyone, but I think that's how it works. But like, kind of like I have Alexa as my loan coordinator here. He has like essentially three of those, and one is conventional and two are SBA. But yeah, you're right. And then Patty, shout out Patty Asai, she did 50 million, I think, and she has a partner, kind of like I have Alexa. She has someone that she works with. So you're absolutely right. So what else? Like, how were you meeting these folks, these buyers and stuff like that?
Not to give away too much of the secret sauce, but ultimately, when you brand yourself and when you provide exceptional service and have raving fans and get deals approved, people gravitate towards you.
Right.
We don't, you know, all of our business is by referral. We don't pay anybody for referring business to us. And we take very much of a consultative approach with our buyers, in the sense that we start talking to them months and sometimes years, believe it or not, years before they even acquire a business. And we're part of their acquisition team. And we also bring in, you know, other people, be it a due diligence firms or a e-commerce acquisition attorney who is actually down in your neck of the woods. We build a team around the buyer So ultimately, when they do find the right business to acquire, their team's already assembled. They're off to the races. And we've been very successful in doing that. And we get paid well for our service. We do charge our buyers. Yes, guys, we do charge for our buyers. I know BDOs are all scared to do that or can't do that because their SBA shop doesn't allow that. But
there's a lot of different interpretations of that. Yeah.
we do a lot of things for our buyers, and we have a 98% approval rate on our loans.
And that's probably the number one value point for someone to work with you. That's huge.
All right. And banks on average, or bank and non-bank lenders on average, are at 62% as of last year.
I love it because you were thinking big, you were thinking entrepreneurial, you weren't thinking like a banker. And a lot of the BDOs come up through banking, and it's just a different thing. So what else in terms of, well, let me ask you this actually. Did you start developing the e-commerce niche when you were a BDO, and how did that go? Like, what was your biggest challenge there within the bank trying to develop that niche?
That's a really good question, because one thing that's prevalent in our industry is that a BDO is a generalist. You know, he or she does building loans, she does business acquisitions, he does this, she does that. It's like very generalist. And I came in going, here's what I do. And they're like, and which is unheard of. Well, there's one other person I know that does that. That's, hotel loans. That's what he does. Hotels, motels. That's all he does. You might even know that person. But if you're the key is, in my belief, is that you, especially at my age, you got to do what you like to do. I like business acquisition. So I told them right out of the gate, this is what I do. And they were okay with it until I brought in huge numbers, and they're like, well, our portfolio, there's a concentration, and it was actually a concentration of their entire portfolio of 4%. And they didn't like that. So August of 2018, they cut me off from producing any more loans.
Can you imagine if they didn't, and their portfolio was heavy e-commerce in 2018, 2019, and maybe less hotels, less, restaurants, and then you head into a pandemic? How much better off would they have been?
Exactly. And they were very narrow-sighted. And also, again, back to my point, Ray, most shops, despite what they tell you, they don't want a $50 million producer like Patty. You mentioned Patty. They want the guy or gal that does 8 to 10 million, that keeps their effing mouth shut and toes the line and shows up at all the meetings, and total yes men, for lack of a better term. They don't want guys like me, definitely.
No, that's you're right. And I'm the same way. That's why I work for a non-bank lender, because how many banks, like if you ask Heidi, my sales manager, she wants me to keep doing 50 million. And she wants all her BDOs doing like 30 million. And, and I do this podcast. Literally my marketing guy internally was just about to make me a graphic for the Coleman thing for my podcast. And I was like, you don't have to do that. Like, the podcast is my side hustle. I'm just grateful you guys let me do it. A bank would probably censor me. I'd be canceled by now, Stephen.
They would. You'd cancel culture within a bank. Yeah. I had my own promotional material. I begged the bank, one of them, to allow me to hire someone like Bill, who eventually joined me, and they wouldn't do it. And at one point, and this is no lie, the bank vice president down in Miami flew up to Tampa, took me out to a really nice dinner, and said, hey, as a top producer, I want to, whatever. And I don't want to get into too much detail, but then went on to tell me that I'm making too much money. And that was it.
And then crazy.
2 weeks later, they cut me off from production. So I had to go, and I went to another bank here local to Tampa. That certainly didn't work out because the same exact thing happened to me there. So
you see that a lot, by the way. BDOs start making too much because they're too successful, and the bank doesn't like it. But it's like, it's contradictory. The power of niching down is, to me, something we've talked about before on the podcast, because you have the 7A umbrella, Then under that, you have business acquisitions. And then under that, you have e-commerce business acquisitions. And a lot of BDOs are afraid to say no to the other stuff, or tell the market, they want to tell the market they do everything, but that did end up working for you. So I think that's a big testament to niching down.
Yeah, I think, and you're right, Ray. I think a lot of BDOs are like, well, I'm going to miss out on these other opportunities. And really, what's going to happen is they are going to be the resident expert at commercial, like uh, commercial building financing, or they're going to become the resident expert at hotel motel financing, or they're going to. That's the thing they don't realize is that the further up the pyramid you are in terms of specialization, you actually will get paid more for your time than just being a generalist. And I mean, think about a doctor. If you're a general practitioner, I mean, you get paid a decent living, but if you're a brain surgeon, holy crap! I mean, you're pulling in. If indeed money's your goal, you're going to be paid a lot more than a general practitioner. So I think the more specialized you are, if I could, you know, from personal experience, the more you get paid for what you
I
do.
agree. And I just talked to a business who was paying a knee surgeon $600K annually. My general is not making that. To your point.
Right. And also what ends up happening is the referral sources end up gravitating towards you because, oh, Ray Drew knows this type of lending. I want to send my client to him, as opposed to, these BDOs that don't do that.
Exactly.
Um, and another thing I want to go back to, and I think it's important to your audience, is that it's all about paradigm. So if you work at a bank and you're a BDO, SBA BDO at a bank, you got to think about things that actually you're a BDO and they're working for you, meaning you're bringing in the business, and there needs to be a paradigm shift the way you view your employment. You're a BDO first and foremost. You're a business within a business. You're pulling business into that bank, and they need to provide you with a level of support to support your efforts, as opposed to most BDOs are like, well, I'm an employee of a bank, and yeah, go out and get loans and for them. You're actually going out and getting loans for you, and they're an extension of your team. And there needs to be that paradigm shift if you want to do big numbers. And if you don't have that, you're going to just be the $8 to $10 million producer and never move up the chain.
Well, I agree with part of that, and I disagree with part of that. I think you're absolutely right. You need the support. Like, I can't go out and develop business, and then my underwriter takes 30 days to underwrite a loan. But then you also have to produce, and you can't make up excuses of, well, you're not giving me this. Well, you also, you haven't brought in a deal in 6 weeks. Like, there's a little bit of balance there. So I see it more like a partnership where it's in everyone's interest to provide the resources needed to provide good customer experiences and close loans.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not bringing in business, obviously, I was pretty much assuming that a BDO would be bringing in business. If you're not bringing in business, a BDO, the bank should get rid of you
That's
because meanwhile,
sometimes a
you
big
know,
assumption.
and that's another thing. As you know, this industry doesn't do. If somebody doesn't produce and has been talked to many times and is cutting out Friday at noon and showing up at noon on Monday for work and all that, and doesn't produce, I mean, banks should just, sorry. I mean, and they don't do that, as you know. I mean, we've all worked with BDOs that don't produce anything. They do their onesie twosies, clog up the whole system, and then the people that actually produce, it's detrimental to having those people on the team. This is from firsthand experience.
No, well, you're correct, but on that, but what are these sales kind of lessons you've learned over the years that maybe some of those lower performing BDOs can maybe start implementing to increase their numbers?
A lot has to do with goal setting, and not because the bank makes you. I mean, okay, goal setting. What are our goals what are our weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, annual goals? And knowing what those goals are. And we post them here at our offices on every single wall, what our goals are for the quarter, the year, et cetera. And then having the self um, confidence that I'm going to achieve these goals. And unfortunately, we are our worst own critic. And you got to look at your successes as not focus on your failures. We've all had failures, and you have to implement Kaizen, which is constant. It's a Japanese term meaning constant, never ending improvement, and constantly fine tune your processes, and stick to high producing activities, um, reaching out to referral sources, be it via email, text, phone calls, etc. And by the way, you can call somebody. You don't have to email or text. It does work. And you got to be willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do, like working on weekends, like working on your business, not in your business, making that last call. Most people, and I drum this into my kids' brains, most people don't do that. And that's how you separate yourself from the pack.
That's so good to hear. And I really like what you said about constantly improving. That's something that I know I feel that, every year throughout the year, constantly trying to get better. If you're not growing, you're like shrinking.
Right. And how's that working for you, Ray? I think it's working pretty well for you, right?
Yeah, and honestly, books too, by the way. I read a lot of sales, marketing, all the types of books like that. It's something I've definitely done along the way, and you pick up a lot from that.
Investing in yourself. Read those
Yeah.
books, listen to those audiobooks. I constantly listen to audiobooks, and picking out little nuggets of how it can help your business. I even listen to podcasts that have nothing to do with lending, but they have a lot to do with uh, production of bringing business in. And you got to delineate yourself from everybody else, and don't think of yourself as a group, and really say, yeah, I'm better than the rest. And not in a, you know, not better. I mean, just I'm going to produce better than most people because I'm willing to do these things. And really breaking down your business on how you're doing things and asking yourself, are we doing this in the most efficient and effective way, or can we do it some other way that'll be more efficient, more effective, and take less time?
Yeah, be curious, be skeptical. Um, Sometimes you have to, push back sometimes in various ways to say, hey, is this really the best way to be doing this? It's all of that. And and we've talked about a lot over this podcast, but if you take one or two things and then just start doing that next week and then re-listen to it and subscribe and like the podcast channel on YouTube, then you start putting one foot in front of the other. You keep going and growing and getting better and better. And it's not an overnight thing. It takes work. Sometimes it could be a grind, but it's fun. I like it. It keeps me going.
And it'll blow your audience away. And do this. It blew me away even. I wrote down everything I do during the day, and I came to a point where, holy crap, 3/4 of my day is doing bullshit. I got to focus on doing the things that bring business in, and really be cognizant of that. And it's amazing. Like checking your email all day long. No,
Nope.
don't do that. And also saying, okay, what 3 things do I have to get done tomorrow that I'm not even going to open up Outlook and I'm going to crank out tomorrow before I even look at emails, and be having that discipline. And we all falter. I falter too. I slept in yesterday, for example, but it's really having that discipline and really holding yourself to a high bar. There's a reason a lot of those athletes that are competing in China during the Olympics are at that level, because they demand excellence from themselves, and they're not mediocre. If they're mediocre, they wouldn't be in Beijing right now. So you got to really, demand excellence from yourself, and stick to that, and hold yourself accountable constantly.
Well, let me ask you this, and then I'll let you go. Most BDOs were always kind of work from home. Now, even more are. most people are just work from home. I heard 1 out of 7 jobs in private sector is remote now. I heard that on 60 Minutes a month ago. And before the pandemic, it was 1 out of 60 or something like that. So like now my office is in my house. Well, for me, it's always been. People have this idea of the 9 to 5 job. You go to work, you do your work, you come home and you don't work. How should we be thinking about this?
So that's a really good question. It's hard to break because we've all been programmed to work 9 to 5. Like the whole society works 9 to 5. And it's funny, there's a book out that says working 5 to 9, which is interesting. But anyway, really breaking free from that. And for example, my best production hours are in the morning. So like 6 to 10. And also, I mean, there are good attributes in working out of the house. You know, I've done it before. As long as you're disciplined enough that, you know, when it's time to quit work, that you're not gravitating back to your home office after dinner and not spending time with your kids or your spouse. And that's one reason why I have an actual office as opposed to a home office, is because even though most of my kids are grown and gone, there's that gravitational pull back to, oh God, I got to return that email, I got to do this and that. I don't even bring my laptop home. I can't work, you know. So there are good things though, in terms of home office, in the sense that you're not spending time commuting. You're not getting caught up in all the office bullshit, waste of time stuff. So that's good. The drawback though is social. I think it's okay to have, you know, a little bit of banter in the office and a kind of synergy. And if everybody works remote, you don't really have that. So that's, you know, pluses and minuses to both. But guys, if you work out of your home office, like when you're done, you're done. Spend time with your family, spend time with your wife or husband and kids. Don't get pulled back into the vortex.
So from what I'm hearing is stay single and don't have kids so you can work a lot. That's the lesson. That's the lesson I've just taken away from this. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
but
don't be married and have 4 kids like me. Just kidding.
If your laptop was home, would you go to it at night? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know that about yourself. So you create these boundaries. Well, I think we'll end it there, Stephen. I appreciate you hopping on ecommercelending.com if you want to find Stephen. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me on, Ray. I appreciate it.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.